Awesome. Well, you guys ready to get started? If you can grab a seat, grab a drink, as Darrell said, we would love to kick things off. So, welcome to Bazaar. We promise we're going to explain what that means. Um, really excited to be here. I'm Meryl Haslak. I'm part of the partnerships group at Anelect. My colleague, Darrell Jursa of Resolution Media, and Darrell's going to be the moderator of panel one. Huge thanks to Samba TV and Twitter, who are our sponsors today. I forgot my shades, so I appreciate the collateral also. Um, you know, for the last couple of years, Omnicom, Anelect, Res, we partnered on something called Story Connect, and we did that out of the JW Marriott. Real-time insights, talking about the hot topics around South by, and we were happy to do that this year. But we said let's sort of move off the beaten path, literally and figuratively, this year and change things up. I think we have a lot of really great stories to tell with our fabulous partners, with our clients, and with so many of the Omnicom agencies that are here and that you're going to see today. So it's really about hacking the future, how we've been doing that, how we plan to do that moving forward, and we think it's going to be a great day of music and content. So thank you.
Thank you, Meryl. Thanks, everybody, for coming. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors of this event, Twitter and Samba TV. A little round of applause for them. You're eating and drinking because of them, so that's a plus. That's a plus, so thanking them. And to Meryl's point, we wanted to do something that was a little off the beaten path, right? So having three bands and interspersing them between these three different panels, we thought it'd be a good idea just because there's a lot of stuff going on outside these four walls, lots of things to see, and so we just want to make this a casual conversation. The three panels, we'd like to think they're great topics for all of you to be interested in. There's stuff that we're talking about constantly. Yep. And if you're interested, we're streaming this live through a VR headset on a driverless car that's driving around the block. It's a Yugo. So if you're interested in it, just jump out in front of it. I'm sure it'll stop for you. Everything will be good. Some other logistics stuff. You see some hats. There's some Twitter hats underneath the seats here. We've got some hats, some Anelect hats, and some sweatbands over here to your left. Also, the bathrooms, which smell like rock and roll. It's awesome. We got food in the back, which is spectacular. And I think that's just about it for all of the little things that are going on here. Am I missing anything?
Unofficial South by sort of
Oh,
event.
yes. So, we're talking about three bands, three panels, three things that we cannot say when we're up here. South by Southwest, FIFA, and the Olympic Committee. Just anything involving the Olympics, just please don't tweet that out. It just makes everybody uncomfortable. And three words we shouldn't be saying up here at all. Pivot. What's the other one? Lean. Yeah, it could be lean. That's a little uncomfortable. And what's the other one? There's disrupt. Yeah. Not even coming close to saying those words up here.
I just made that up. No, I'm kidding. We're being serious.
That's good. It works. See, when we get fired, there's a stand-up thing happening here. That's going to be even better for next week.
We're basically just practicing.
Yes, thank you. All right. So without further ado, I think we're going to get started with the first panel. I'm going to invite our first panelist up here, and I'll introduce them as they walk up here, and we try to make certain that there's room for everybody here. Let's hope we have enough room for this over here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to hold this over. Actually, sorry, it's a little tight. Less. Here you go. I'm going to give you that first. Sure. Okay, so, pardon me. Sorry, it's a little tight up here. The sign's going to fall down. It's going to be really fun. So the first, the first panel that we have here is going to be a fun one. It's the new traditional media. There's a lot of conversations these days about, mobile's going to overtake this and outdoor's going to overtake that, and all these different conversations about how all these mediums are changing constantly, right? And so it's always fun to see how these mediums are changing in the context of a piece of work, right? Where, somebody does a press release and an announcement or otherwise. The panelists that we have up here, I think, are uniquely qualified to talk about all of this. So I'm going to introduce you guys, and just because I want to get right to the subject matter here, I want to make certain that you talk about everything that we want to talk about in the context of your gig. So, Ash, I'm going to start with you. Ashwin Navin, right? CEO of Samba TV. And to his right, we got Elizabeth Luciano, VP of Marketing and Brand Strategy for A&E Networks. And then we've got Andrew, the CEO of The Newsstand. Not to be confused with The Newsstand, it's The Newsstand. And there's some exciting stuff that he's been doing. That'll be fun. And then I've got Les Hollander right to my left here. He is the Global Head of Audio Monetization for Spotify. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into having these conversations about the mediums. And so any of you, just feel free to jump in on this first question. So what triggered the mediums to change the way they went about doing things, whether it was from a listener or a viewer perspective? Like, what was the trigger? And let's make certain that we don't start off with, well, everybody's a publisher, because we know that, and that's great. But was there any event, was there anything going on that any of you saw that triggered the change in any of the mediums that we know and love these days?
You know, I think from a radio and music perspective, at some point there was a democratization of content. People were listening to radio and they were hearing the same 300 songs, unfortunately, over and over again, and realized that there was a place where they can get personalized music, customizable music, and it was democratized with millions and millions of songs. And they started to feel that connection that music has, that music was really talking to them once they were able to do this. So to me, that was really the inflection point when things started to change relating to radio and music.
Got it. And so do you feel like maybe there was, so with radio, you know, we talk about the music, and you and I were having a chat before about we're missing that little bit of a local feel for that. Is there anything in any of the other mediums from a localization or sort of personality-driven medium that is still taking hold of people, whether it's a local periodical or a local television show?
Here.
Oh, I guess I could use that. Want me to use that one? I don't know about localization in television necessarily. I mean, I do think that there are probably some popular local discovery shows, but I think that by and large, where you see that is, a lot of the localization is happening in digital with short form content specific to those areas. I think that personalization is actually something interesting, because when I looked at the first question as I was prepping this morning, always last minute artist, when I started to think about what changed TV, the first thing that my mind went to is actually music. Because as people understood that they could personalize their music selection, and as innovations in the television industry, like back in the early days, TiVo and DVR started to teach people that they could choose what they wanted to watch when they wanted to watch, all of a sudden the television industry started to shift. And I would say that the massive change that's caused us to change so much is not necessarily a localization thing, but more around wanting to consume what you want when you want. And so as someone who makes content, and now we're no longer a TV network, we are a content maker across all platforms. What we have to do is really make sure that people can watch our stuff when and where they want, anywhere, whether it's a connected device, a mobile device, all of that good stuff.
Got it.
I don't think that answers a localization question.
No,
but
that's a great it's a great pivot. Oh, I almost said it. It's all right.
Oh, the P word.
That was good. Almost said it. Yeah. That's true, right? Exactly.
Put $1 in for everyone.
Everybody has to do a shot.
That's true. Andrew, what do you think from a...
I mean, I don't really look at, there was a moment in time. I mean, I think it's actually been quite gradual in many ways. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting to me right now is you're starting to see this mashup of the digital and the physical, things happening in real spaces, real time. How can you be, endemic to a particular moment in a person's life? A big part of what we're trying to do with the Newsstand, which is really building a media platform in many ways through this kind of symbiotic relationship with these mini convenience stores that we're creating. And people spend a lot of time talking about things like native content and stuff like that. And for us, we're actually truly native because people are going from here to work, and they go past this place, and it's raining out, and they might need an umbrella. But that's a great time to actually engage with people. But there's a lot of things that go along with that now.
Yeah.
Getting them into our app, getting them into our ecosystem, all of that kind of stuff. You have the ability to do that once you are, I think, in service of them in some way, and you're doing something for them. And so I think the set of expectations, perhaps from a consumer perspective, in terms of how are you going to help me as part of my day, I mean, at the end of the day, there's three things people want. They need products, they want services, and they want experiences. And those experiences might be a bit of entertainment, something live. The services are pretty obvious, and there's products. And there's companies like Amazon now basically saying we are going to, populate all three of those planets in a very
we'll
big
take care
way.
of that for you whenever you are, wherever you are.
Yeah,
right?
and
exactly.
but I think it's an interesting moment where people start to understand how that value exchange is really blended at this point.
Yeah.
I'll get toilet paper from you because I'll also get your movies.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting moment that I'm starting to see now. That's this blending of stuff.
It's interesting. As you were talking, as all of you were talking here about, I kept thinking about all the data, the amount of information that we always like to talk about. Well, we could take the information and do this with this, but it's, Ash, you guys have a lot of information about what people are doing right now, what they're watching, how they're behaving, whether it's passive or active. So how do you organize all of this so that it's easy to come up with the content for the moments that matter?
It's not so easy,
Yeah.
just because maybe to answer your earlier question too, I met Craig Newmark recently. I was kind of geeked out. It was kind of a fanboy moment for me because I joined Craigslist when it was just an email list,
Right.
for about 1,500 or 2,000 people in San Francisco looking for apartments and things like that in the late 90s, early 2000s. And, you think about what he's done to traditional print. I mean, he's completely fucked up the whole print business.
Right.
Not him alone, but
Right.
his category of activity on his site has had this dramatic impact. And maybe to answer your first question, you've got a recognition in traditional media that you can't stamp out these things through legal activity or by forcing people to behave differently. That there's these new norms that are coming online.
Right.
And from a data perspective, to answer your question, what we have is transitions that are happening, and it's not. I think people fall into the trap of saying, all right, well, kids are going to do this from now on, and they're not going to go back, and the world has changed forever. But what we're seeing from data just around television, for example, is that while in college you may not have television and cable, but when you leave college, you get a job, you maybe start to have kids, maybe cable starts to look like a much better value proposition. So you can't categorically say that, well, things are just sort of different, and that we can just bank on cord cutting and other things just being now the new norm. On a one-to-one basis, you need to understand, where is someone in their life cycle and their adoption of technologies, and, are they in that state in a permanent basis, or are they likely to come back to something that feels more traditional?
So you're saying some things don't change? Wow.
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Behaviorally, otherwise.
Certainly, one thing that is true is that that we have consumers in control of a lot more things than they have been. As traditional media, I think we dropped the term traditional because we have to be willing to play on the consumer's terms rather than on some sort of standard that we're going to jam down their throats because we own the spectrum, or we own shelf space at Walmart or something like that. We can't bank on that scarcity anymore.
Yeah, makes sense. Nice.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different types of data that we have to offer. There's data for selling and data for connecting with consumers in different ways. So, data for selling certainly is 100% authenticated first-party data. And then you start to get deeper and deeper where we know where those people are, we know what devices they're using, we know their age, but we know what moments they're in. We know they're studying, we know they're at the gym, we know they're getting ready to go out, we know they're throwing a party. And we're able to transition that data, obviously, for customers, but also to create moments. And then we layer on top of that the metadata that we have, the analysis of 30 million songs, the tempo, the beat, the cadence, etc. And then you put sort of the environment and what's going on in the Twitter sphere, on Facebook, and really scraping the web for public sentiment about that music and about those trends and about those cultural insights, and putting it together and then creating content. And one of the pieces of content that you mentioned before, Discover Weekly. So one of our most successful programs that we've launched in 2015, where every Monday we are giving our listeners a playlist of 30 songs that were customized based on your tastes, based on what you listen to, what people who listen to that you also listen to, and then a new song. And it's been pretty groundbreaking.
Who knows Discover Weekly? Yeah. It's awesome, right? Yeah, it's really, really good. That's, I mean, the science behind that, connecting and selling, that's an important nuance because I can't tell you how many meetings I'm in where you're first selling and then you're sort of connecting, but then people say it in the same sentence. And that's that nuance. So like developing, like music is a great example of how you'd be able to do that, like science of selling, science of connecting. But are there, like, what are the other pieces of kind of content? Because I think about a creative director, right? Or I think about anybody else who's like you're trying to translate that to and saying, hey, we know this person is doing this over here, and then we know that they're doing this over here, and it's less emotional. Like, how do you decipher that so that it's easy to understand to be able to create that kind of content?
Do you want to? Go ahead. So I think this is a challenge that we actually face every day because as part of my job, I inform our programmers as to overarching trends. And I think that for creatives, sometimes there's like what I like to call death by data, which means you give them so much that they just can't even think of an idea.
Right.
And so I think that what we like to do is get all of the information for them and then pull out the largest insights we can and tell them to run with it. And that, we'll filter later. But I do think that, when you're looking at creating, you have to keep it a little bit broad because there are some things that there is just no explaining for.
Really? In this business? I thought we explained everything.
Shocking.
Wow. Okay.
No, I mean, I can think of lots of insights. I can think of one really big one from our own networks that they don't allow me to mention anymore, but it was a show that we had, which I'm now going to,
But you're going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You guys won't tell anybody.
Bazaar. Yeah.
And I actually don't even like to mention it because I feel like it reflects poorly on me. But way back in the day, in 2012, we launched a show called Duck Dynasty, which is about a bunch of affable, we thought, rednecks from the South. And everyone said to us, "Just go target NASCAR. Like this is exactly where it's going to work." And you know what? Like people loved them, and the oddest people loved them until, of course, they pissed everyone off. Yeah. But I think that beyond that, I can think of many different examples where there's just no accounting for taste. And so, while I think that data and insights are incredibly important for my job, which is marketing, for my ad sales team's job, and it's what I want to hear when I'm in meetings. If I'm briefing a creative director or if I'm briefing our programmers, I really take it down a notch and don't say as much. I think where the beauty comes in is when we can take what they've created and tie it back to what we're seeing in the data when we go out to our advertisers and talk to people like that. So that's.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, the data over. By the way, I've always wanted to be on the stage at the Continental Club, and the fact that I'm here talking about fucking big data is really
It's awesome.
wasn't what I
Yeah.
had in my head.
Do you want somebody to
I
play a
have
little
be
guitar
honest about
underneath
that.
it? Yeah.
But anyway, but no, I mean, the context is a really important part of it. And again, with the newsstand, what's interesting is we have this data that comes from what people are buying through like our POS system, and we have our app. Mm-hmm. So we actually know, these are the articles people are clicking on. This is the music they're listening to. Yeah. And those data sets really come together in a very, I think, cool little ecosystem for us. But really what our job is to be curators. And being a curator on behalf of people is, certainly taking some inputs from them, but it's really about having a worldview and a curiosity and a voice yourself. And that's really what people are buying into more than anything. And, there's so much that we could be doing in terms of this person frequents this location. Let's, send them this particular message at this moment to drive them. And we'll get there and do that kind of stuff. But I think that sort of automation, people just sniff it out more and more. Yeah. And I think kind of, it's like you just know when you're being retargeted and it sucks, And and I know we're talking more about how it informs a creative process, but I think people very often think that is a creative process unto itself, and I think that that's not a good thing.
Well, right.
So
it's a big part of the business these days, but
sure.
It's I remember there was a letter that Bill Bernbach wrote in 1947 when he was at Gray, and he was a copywriter before he created DDB, and it was all about making certain that we did not science the hell out of creative, right? And so that whole balance between art and science. But Ash, when you're looking at all the information, and I mean the company itself is like it's all about providing that kind of data. Is there any way that you guys also nuance that so that there's a little bit of a let's not lose the art behind it, or is there an art behind presenting that kind of information?
Well, there's so many decisions that marketers are making. Beyond just the creative, you might have multiple creatives, multiple messages, lengths, formats, et cetera, and then the context that you're placing these things might have more to drive performance than the creative itself. And so, controlling for each of these decisions to be able to test them is really tough, especially when in traditional media the cost of testing is so high.
Right.
There's really not a good way to just test and learn and then to be able to iterate quickly. I'm not going to use the word lean because I don't want to part with the dollar, but
there it is.
but that's something we can learn from sort of the digital side of things. Is that the cost of building control groups and testing creative is actually quite low by comparison, and we can I think liberate some of the creative decisioning. Once you get into a situation where you're encouraged to take risks, to try as many different things as possible, and then just have the data sitting there ready for someone to be able to react to it. And then once you find the things that work, the sequence, the messaging, the creatives, then to be able to take it back to traditional media to amplify that, where the stakes are much higher and the risk is obviously much higher as well.
It's so hard for us to reference the past, though, too. Like, I hear you talking, and it's like, okay, so if you take a snapshot in time of all the data, and you make certain that the brand manager, after this brand manager, has access to that, it's like, you're sort of creating, you have to create a little bit of a Bible for this stuff, or encyclopedia, or something that you can reference, because it feels like every single time we do something, it's again, the more things change, the more they remain the same. But how are you going to make certain that this gets translated going forward? Like, but by the way, we did hack the future, and that's what we're all about here. So, like, how in the future are you referencing all of this so that people can take action on it too? Like,
one of the things that we showed at CES, just as kind of a sneak peek for folks that we're in business with, but we're getting broader. If anyone's keen to take a look, we're happy to share it. But it was just simply a web dashboard that you would assume is measuring and providing insight and analytics for web creative. We're actually using it for TV for the first time.
Cool.
To be able to say, all right, how is the TV creative broken down by creative performing next to each other and within certain networks and environments, and it actually gives you the same level of insight, real time, that you would expect from Google Analytics, but for something that was once offline and very traditional and very slow to plan and execute. And we had some really awesome reactions to that. I imagine where that goes is exactly what you're talking about. It's not a monolithic Bible like post-campaign report that someone's got to decipher. It's something that you can be actually reacting to in real time.
Right, makes sense. The whole art of creating the content. We talked a little bit about sort of the insights around it and how we group data. Are we collectively as a business doing a good job of taking the information and making cool stuff with it? Or is it, and this is, a shop inside Omnicom, the puppy monkey baby, right? Like, I was not involved in any of that, but I would have loved to have been in that room thinking about how many people were really quoting data. Other than like, we dig monkeys, we dig babies, and we dig puppies. So let's freaking create something so crazy and see what happens, right? I mean, is anybody doing anything interesting like that, do you think?
I think it's about using the content to provide context and create great programming. So, whether it's Discover Weekly, whether it's Fresh Faces, whether it's taking that data and applying it to the moment. We created a playlist called "Love Wins" when same-sex marriage, was passed throughout the U.S. And it's really using the data for those moments and using the data in an intellectual way where you're not just crushing the consumer with it, with the wrong information.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to maybe previous to starting the newsstand when I was running Mother. I mean, I didn't see a lot of great campaigns that came out of, a data set. Like, I mean, there's certainly an insight moment. We did a campaign for KY that was very famous, and it came out of this bit of research that was around people who prioritize sex and intimacy lead more interesting lives. They eat spicier food, they go on more vacations, and this whole idea of keep life sexy sort of came out of some data, I guess, on some level. But really, the communications that came out of that was just a pure comedy leap that people loved. It had nothing to do with really the insights as much as a strategist. I really felt like it was down to me driving that campaign. It had nothing to do with me. It was really about.
Was there any particular medium? I mean, it was television.
It was
if I
TV.
remember.
Yeah. It was
TV.
a very successful
Yeah.
TV campaign. It
Yeah.
was. It was hilarious, and it was very successful for them. For a moment, that particular lube was like the iPod of lubes. It was.
It's all right.
sold
Mark,
like hotcakes.
mark the time.
Yeah.
Lube was just mentioned, and
Yes.
it's before 5. So good.
That-
Excellent. Yeah.
all right.
Good. Thanks. Excellent.
Do you want me to continue
Yeah.
on?
Absolutely.
You know, I do think one of the things that we haven't mentioned is that I think that skill sets also have to evolve with this, sort of wealth of data that we have. And so I think for a lot of people, numbers are a scary thing, or deciphering numbers are a scary thing. And I think one of the challenges that we face as we try to, and I think, one of the interesting things I said earlier was we are becoming a content company. We are very heavily invested in people being able to watch our long-form content anywhere and everywhere. We have over 50 million app downloads. And we're really trying to also make a better short-form content platform across, our various social handles, just because we have a lot of tonnage there. And I think we look to places like BuzzFeed and the way they use data with their creative together to help inspire us do better, both from getting our brand out there from my perspective, and then from an ad sales perspective, allowing those people who partner with us to get some of that brand rub off as well. So, I think we love the way that, and it's actually exactly what you were talking about, taking insights into exactly what's happening, not crushing people with them or being too ham-fisted about it or anything, but just simply, allowing creative to bubble up from those insights. But it takes a very specific individual to be able to surface that in the correct way. And so we're really working hard to try and find those individuals to help us do that. And also the platforms like Samba, who's been incredibly helpful to help us mine for those insights.
Well, it's an interesting time for your business because I talk to a lot of folks in Hollywood who have the opportunity to take data and make stuff out of it. A lot of them are like, you know what? This is what worked before. So let's go ahead and do it. So you're in a unique spot where you're all about applying data, but then the creators themselves, to that point, like it hasn't really changed in some cases. The process is like, oh man, I got a cool idea. Let's go with it and see what happens. Let's pilot it. I mean, there's measurement around it, but it's almost like things haven't really changed all that much with that. So
I'd say yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, I think that you're right. Production communities want to make what they want to make, and it's up to us as to whether or not we invest. I think the other big thing that you're seeing across multiple media companies is taking production in-house so that we can mine for these insights and we can do it ourselves without having to wait on those ideas or try and work with people who aren't interested in listening.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Ash, you want to sit? You gonna leave it there?
We're just a data company.
Oh, just a data company. Well, on that note, so let's get in the Wayback Machine, right? And let's go back a little bit. And so I think about every holiday dinner, or when I get the opportunity to talk to my parents about what it is I do. Say advertising, then you start to get a little deep, and they're like, you know what, we're out. We've all been there. So. Bringing it back into business, and maybe it is a personal experience, like how would you describe what you do now to somebody who was in the business, say 30, 40 years ago? Like how, I mean, there's a lot of gut back then in the traditional mediums. There's a lot of, hey, let's see what works. Like how would you describe it to somebody? Simplest of terms, I guess. There's your hint.
Who am I describing this to?
Somebody who is, let's see, an ad exec just
doesn't matter,
stepped out of the wormhole.
No,
Yeah, there you go.
I think,
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting to me is, things haven't changed on a lot of levels. And being this hybrid, media and retail company, at the end of the day, the only currency that's ever mattered is the time and attention that you can get from human beings, right? Media companies are like, we have all this time. We will sell it to you, people who want to sell stuff. And that's kind of the way the world's gone around. And now those things are being combined, and that's what's really interesting to me. But ultimately, we're a company that wants to spend time with people and be in service. We want to uplift their day. We call ourselves a day improvement company. And sometimes that is, hey, it's raining out, here's a free umbrella. And sometimes this is an awesome playlist that we put in your app. And it's really about how do we engage people in a way that's positive. And if you can do that, you can make money from it.
Yeah.
Get time and attention from people in a positive way, and then we'll figure out different ways of monetizing it.
Got it.
I'll hand it to the head of
Speaking of
monetization over here.
monetization.
Speaking of
There
monetization.
you go, Les. Yeah.
Well, if it was 30 years ago, I'd have to have a cigarette in my. And a
Hey,
drink in my
nice.
hand.
There you go. Right.
So
This place smelled completely different too. Though that's
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I'd probably make it simple and talk about, you know, you come home, you want to put on the hi-fi and pour yourself
Nice.
a drink and listen to some good music. But you get to song 3 on the Sinatra album and you realize, I really want to listen to the Beatles.
Yeah. Right.
So there's this thing called Spotify with millions and millions of songs and the ability to create your own playlist at a touch. Not only from your TV, but from your phone on the wall, you can just dial it up, whatever you want to listen to. And you talk about the democratization, which I talked about before, and the ability to connect with those moments and create those moments for yourself and customize.
That's cool. That's cool.
You look so awesome with that cigarette now.
I
You're like Dean Martin or something.
Do you want one? Yeah.
know. Do you want to go next?
Sure. So 30 years ago, there's this startup called Nielsen.
Oh yeah.
And
Heard of them.
we do that, but we're 1,000 times bigger.
Oh,
That's probably how I would
okay.
describe myself. That's
Wow, that's interesting. Okay.
Oh, geez. And now for what I do. You know, I think what's interesting and probably, you know, a little bit indicative as to how things are going, I would describe what I do as a TV network as similar to what it was, almost, you know, to a degree that hasn't been seen previously because, you know, you watched television in the 60s and a lot of times there were a lot of products integrated into the shows and there was a big time where they walked away from that and now we're walking back towards it again. But I do think it comes down to the exact, you know, same message, which is to try and find people at the moment. My job as a marketer and our job selling ad spots within all of our content, whether it's, you know, on the linear network or through connected devices, is to find people when they're receptive to the message and to find the right audience. And so my job on a day-to-day basis is to try and use my psych degree to figure out when people are in the best mindset to hear advertising and act upon it.
That's cool. That's cool. Is there? And I'm gonna. The last question here. Is there any medium that needs to be reinvented? Skywriting?
Yeah. Well, I would say up until like 6 months ago, I would have said, you know, out of home could do with a little refreshing, but it seems you guys are already on that to a certain extent with your connected, which is very, very cool. Sort of creepy too, but we're all slightly creepy in the way that we follow people around. And, you know, I'll be hard on my industry. I think television has a long way to go.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it hasn't really been defined necessarily as a medium, but, you know, physical spaces in the form of retail, you don't realize when you know, go through a duty-free shop, you know, and there's a gleaming bottle of Tanqueray, whatever, that's a paid placement, that there is a media transaction that's actually happening. And yet they don't really operate like media companies. You know, interestingly, in, you know, a few weeks, we have way more Instagram followers than Hudson News. Not that they should be the benchmark of Instagram success, but the point to me is that, you know, these are actually points of distribution from a media perspective. Newsstands traditionally were places that distributed content on behalf of big publishers, and I got the chance to sit down with the CEO of a major publisher, and I'm like, I feel bad for you. He's like, why? I said, because you've had the worst distribution partners in the history of a content company. You have Hudson News and the U.S. Postal Service. And he didn't take kindly to that. But the point is, there's better. We can do a much better job in using these points of distribution to actually engage people, and a big part of that is understanding the context of a person's life at that given moment, and also how to blend technology with what's happening from a physical perspective in a way that's productive for advertisers and productive for patrons. So.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think we're just in the first inning. I think all traditional media can still be reinvented. It's just at the 1.0 version of reinvention. Broadcast radio in particular can still be reinvented with more choice, less interruption, more distribution channels, and a lot less commercialization. You know, there's no doubt when we see the research of why people come to streaming radio in particular, Number one, it's they can get all the content they want. Number two is there's multiple distribution channels. And number three in every single study is less interruption.
Gotcha.
So, building a model where there's a different advertising model where there's less interruption will help reinvent the
Sounds like
medium.
you're asking for more competition.
It's okay.
All right?
Yeah, bring
okay.
more people to the party is good.
Good, good. Okay, cool.
I agree with everything that was just said, but can I mention a company I just met at South by? There's obviously, there's always new and exciting things that are shown here. I don't know if this thing is going to work, but I was introduced to a startup that wasn't presented to me as a media company. It was actually something that felt like more of a therapeutic thing that, people are having a lot of problems with sleep deprivation because, they're bombarded with, very vivid, sometimes troubling images before they go to sleep. And this app was designed to, before you go to sleep, actually allow you to program a dream that you would like to have. And so, as a form of
That's
media,
not
I was
creepy.
thinking,
No, not at all. Nope.
So, it's basically will give you diagnostics on how the quality of your sleep, and if you would like to actually have a certain type of dream, that you could actually choose your own adventure.
So dreams is a medium to be reinvented.
Dreams is a medium,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, not creepy at all. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, yeah
Well,
right?
I was just thinking like sweet dreams.
Exactly. Right,
Or
exactly,
Sweet dreams
exactly.
brought to you by every food company out there, right? So,
Well, thanks. You guys have been a lot of fun. How about it? Round of applause for this panel, right? Good stuff. Good stuff. So thank you. And next up, for those of you interested in music, we are in a music venue. We've got Dale Watson coming up in a little bit. So stay tuned. Thanks, everybody.
That was fun.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.